Well, thank you all for coming, right? My name's Kevin Babiak. I am going to take you through some slides that'll probably take about 35, 40 minutes or so. I hope to have some time for questions at the end. If not, I'm here the balance of the conference. Feel free to connect with me and have follow-up discussions. So I am actually going to dive in. A little bit about me, my team, my background. I'm a senior data scientist with a very large healthcare organization that happens to make pharmaceuticals and medical products. Truthfully, I'm actually an econometrician in terms of my formal training. People have called me a data scientist since I've gotten to the company. It's increased my salary band, so I'm good. I'm very happy with that. I am part of a group called the Global Brand Protection Organization. And what we are charged with is protecting our patients, our customers, and our business interests from illicit trade, right? And that includes really three things. There's counterfeiting, which is basically fake products that are sold under our brand name, right? There is tampering with authentic products. Some of you may be old enough to remember the infamous case of Tylenol being tampered with and laced with cyanide to devastating effect. That's an example of tampering. Also in our scope is something called product diversion, right? That is when products are being sold into markets and channels for which they were not originally intended. So if a product was intended for the United States, it ended up in Brazil, right? That's an example of product diversion. We always say diversion is the gateway to counterfeiting. It shows that your supply chain's been compromised in some way, and it is a leading indicator for counterfeit to occur down the road. Very important for us to study that. My team specifically builds applications. We have a full stack analytics team that builds solutions to problems, basically to help a broader organization do a couple things to protect patients, right? We disrupt illicit trade, right? So we go after bad guys, right? We also try to prevent this stuff from happening in the first place. So we want to really secure our supply chain, protect the integrity of that value chain, right? So that's a little bit about what we do generally. I want to put a human face to this, right? So you get a sense of the type of stuff that we deal with on a routine basis. So I'd like you to meet Lazaro, right? This is a real guy. He's actually from Florida. You may recognize him. He was on TV quite a bit. If you're into watching poker on TV, he was on the World Poker Tour. But he had a little bit of a secret. He was running a very large-scale counterfeiting ring, right? And the way his scheme worked was he solicited the homeless population to engage in prescription fraud, right? He had a doctor on the books. So he would give these homeless guys a gift card. They would go and get a prescription for a low-cost, low-dose HIV medication, right? And Lazaro would take that medication, remove the labels, and replace it with a counterfeit label of the higher price, more premium branded product, and then put that back into the supply chain. Made a boatload of money. Right? It reached customers, nationwide, right? People basically not getting the right medication, right, is the obvious health risk there. We got customer complaints that started to flow in, right? It launched a whole series of investigations, collecting intelligence, and it didn't just impact us. Many of our competitors were impacted by the same guy. So we went in as an industry to try to go after this guy, as we often do. It's a bigger for good mentality when it comes to this stuff, right? And so It took 3 years to figure out who this was and actually bring him down, right? He was ultimately charged with money laundering and selling of counterfeit medications. He pled guilty. He's now in jail for the next 15 years, right? So justice served, right? This is the kind of stuff we deal with routinely. When you start summarizing some of this, it's a global crisis, right? There are lots of Lazzaros out there, right? Huge patient risk, right? According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 10 medications sold in developing countries is substandard or falsified, right? Pharmaceutical Security Institute, which collects data on, from the pharmaceutical companies on incidents, has this global reach hitting just about everybody globally, right? Just in 1 year observation. And we know those incidents are just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a lot more that we simply don't know about. The biggest cost, though, is the human cost, right? Over 250,000 children die from counterfeit medications every year, according to one study, right? It's over a $400 billion problem for the industry, right? And a lot of that is going to finance really bad stuff, right? It's all kinds of organized crime. It's funding wars. It's funding terrorism. The drug cartels use this as a major revenue stream, right? So it's just really bad stuff, right? So any chance I get to do something about this, it's like, sign me up. So why we're here today is, how are we actually tackling this issue, particularly as it relates to analytics and AI, right? How are we dealing with this, right? We didn't just wake up one day and start deploying agentic AI, right? It's been a long, arduous journey, and I'll take you through some of that roadmap just to give you some of the key learnings from along that journey. All right, so first part in any analytics process, right? What specific problems are you trying to solve, right? I know the big picture, what we're trying to do, but how are we going to help my team figure out how to catch the bad guys and protect the integrity of our value chain? What are the specific things that we need to know? I used to run workshops where I'd assemble a big bunch of stakeholders, ask them. They gave me like hundreds of questions, right? This is what I want to know. At the end of the day, it boils up to some really big things. Where and when is this stuff happening? What brands are being impacted and at what time? How big is the issue that we face, right? What is our risk and exposure? What factors are driving this problem? You're getting at root cause, right? And importantly, who are the people that are perpetrating it? How can we get at them, right? What are those signals that we can create to find them in some way, right? When I know all that, then I can turn around and actually try to do something about the problem, right? Sounds easy, right? But when you kind of dive in a little bit deeper, it becomes very complicated. What's a good counterfeit signal, right? How do we separate signal versus noise, right? I may look at like the patterns in our sales data at the customer level as an example and see a big drop in sales. All the fellow modeling nerds out there, a structural break in the series, right? Well, is that a competitive switch, right, which is normal? Or is it somebody going and buying off the gray market, or worse yet, is counterfeiting starting to bleed into the supply chain, right? We have to try to tease all that apart and figure that stuff out. What we realized very quickly, though, is that having more than one signal pointing in the same direction is really where it's at, right? That's really going to give us the confidence to drive the action. So we knew immediately that this is going to be a big exercise in data integration, right, and harmonization. How do we bring all that stuff together? So I've been doing this for a little over 10 years, and it has been that journey, right? Just in terms of where we started where most places people start, traditional business intelligence, basic reporting, right? A lot of plotting of hotspots, right? We look at various signals. A huge signal for us is customer feedback. Customers call, they like to complain, right? I got to separate what's just somebody complaining versus what's real. Is this really a counterfeit when they're calling up and saying this product looks funny, right? That goes through a very formal investigation, and we turn around and we confirm that that is indeed a counterfeit case. Now, I don't like any of this stuff to happen, but when we get confirmed counterfeit cases, that stuff is like gold. You have to learn every possible thing that you can from those cases, right? So we started plotting it. Simple stuff, trending, heat maps, those types of things, rank ordering by brand, right? We continue to do that today. We then started to get more aggressive with going out and trying to find it rather than just having customers telling us where it was. So let's start to generate signals. Go online, start scraping online for illicit listings of our products. Let's look at cross-border trade transactions. We know our authorized distribution channel, so we can look outside of that. When we see those transactions, that's a huge red flag for us, right? Just some examples of things that we go after. Internal sales data, looking for anomalies in the internal sales data, right? All of those things, individual data sets going into a dashboard as a solo thing, right? Doing analysis in silos, right? That's how we got this started. We then evolved to predictive analytics. This is my sweet spot, right? You get to model risk so we can anticipate where the next threat is going to come from. Can also help us understand what the drivers are, the drivers of risk. How strong are my signals, right? Those types of things. Again, a dashboard by itself, right? We then evolved to knowledge graphing. Investigators like their link charts. They like to figure out how people are connected, how organizations are connected, right? We have those capabilities, but again, all standalone, right? Detecting a pattern here. It became death by dashboard in reality, right? That's what we like to say internally. A lot of people probably experience that. It wasn't until we started to really lean into generative AI where some of the walls and the silos started to break down, right? We're now using Gen AI to understand the business context behind our data, so our team can go in and use natural language query to ask questions that they want to go after, right? Rather than sifting through dashboards that they can't find, go ask your question directly, right? That's a huge, huge win for us. Now we're leaning into the agentic part, right? Where we can have individualized agents performing certain tasks in a coordinated manner to get the output that we need when we need it, right? So what does that look like? So we have an actual agentic AI framework that we've developed. We now have this unified data repository where everything is centralized. There's internal and external signals that we've developed. I've mentioned a few already. We have other things like all pharmaceutical products get serialized now for the most part. Still some places in the world that need to come on board, but for the most part, you get in a unique serial number. That helps us trace product movement through the supply chain, at least up to a certain point. That's huge for us, having that track and trace information. Custom seizures, I mentioned the cross-border trade transactions, and the online activity. We also want to understand the market conditions, right? Illicit traders are going to go where there's market opportunity, right? And where the economic incentives are for carrying out the illicit trade. So there are lots of public data available to understand that, things like market size. They also operate in the shadows, right? They like to not get caught, right? So there are metrics out there like the Corruption Perception Index, transparency and trade measures that we track to understand where the environment is fertile for this stuff to actually happen, right? That gives us context. Modelers out there, these are intercept shifts all over the place for each market, right? The one real interesting thing, and I heard it in the discussion this morning about computer vision modeling, right? This has been extremely useful for us, right? Where we are training an algorithm to understand our authentic artwork, right? So that we can downstream scan images, right? And bring that together and understand where the products and the packaging has been violated in some way, right? It creates a heat map for us. You then have generative AI explainability that can rest on top of that, learn the language in the artwork files and other work product, right? And kick back what it is seeing from the heat map, right? In a fairly robust and automated fashion, right? That has been huge for us. Now, the agents are set up to perform all kinds of tasks, right? The biggest ones are the foundational data things that we have to do to get the data ready for analysis. It's doing the ingestion, it's doing the curation of the data, it's normalizing data so it can end up talking to one another. Think about having disparate data sets that each have product names in it, for example. How do you normalize that, right? So we're using these agents to kind of set that up for us, right? The human, of course, is always in the loop through this whole process. And truth be told, we're still in a fairly immature phase with our deployment of this agentic AI. So it's particularly important now. Doing all of the validation along that workflow, or that process, right? But at the end of the day, people are the ones that are taking the insights from this and they're driving the actions, right? That's the important part. And giving us feedback all along the way. Okay, so I have a few sample use cases I wanted to take you through just to show you how this framework is already being leveraged in its infancy. So a lot of since it's now in this unified repository, right, we have, even at the transactional level, we have a lot of common data elements, right? Think of like the serial number of a product, right? Or the lot number for a product, the expiration date. Those can be put together to make a kind of a unique product identifier, right? I have that, all that stuff sits in our SAP systems for all the authentic product. I know where that should be, what markets they should be going to, etc. Right? Now I get a call from a customer saying, hey, I got this product, it looks funny. What's the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to look up in my system, does it even exist, right? Or is it a duplicate serial number, right? Those things right now I can connect very easily with this system. And that gets extended further into connections with other source systems. I may have already had a customer complaint involving a similar product license plate or serial number. It could already be scanned in our image recognition technology, where I begin understanding the profile of the counterfeiters, right? They all leave certain signatures, right? They tell us because they have, hey, they used a certain font that's different from the authentic. All of those types of things are crucial input and information into this whole system, right? This used to be done in meetings, right? Piecing together intelligence one by one, phoning a friend or several friends to get access to all of this. Now, split seconds, you can get this stuff. So it's absolutely huge. Okay, this next situation is where I'm taking that same data, all the signals, and I'm now starting to bubble them up to a higher level, because I want to start to understand the patterns in the different signals, right? So I may, for example, have a particular market and a particular brand within a certain time that's getting a lot of cross-border transactions through unauthorized routes being sold into that market. Okay? That's of interest, right? My radar is up. It's a little bit of smoke, right? But now I may start seeing sales drop from some of our customers in that market. All right? Now we're starting to flame a little bit, right? Now I may, in addition to that, start getting some complaints in, right? All of this stuff can be tied together pretty seamlessly now that this is all bubbled up, right? This is the stuff that can hit us in the face, right? We can rank order brands and markets within certain time periods and know exactly where we need to be focused, right? Okay, my sweet spot, right? Fellow modeling nerds, right? This is all about prediction, right? I want to anticipate risk, right? I want to understand what the key drivers of the risk is or are, right? That's what predictive analytics and good old-fashioned machine learning modeling can do, right? So the way I arrange this is I've got a big sample. I know hard evidence of where this stuff is occurring globally and by market, and at certain points in time, I arrange this in a big longitudinal data set, right? And I can put a bunch of things on the right-hand side, characteristics of markets, characteristics of products. I put different signals into the model, and I can use that to score every combination of brand and market at any given time. And I know, with the relative importance of these predictors, what's driving the risk. I can actually put a value on the signals that we're getting if they're in the model, because I have the relative importance of the factors that are driving the model, right? That helps us figure out, okay, is this helpful information or not, right? So I can assess the entire portfolio from a risk assessment standpoint. All right, the last one is kind of an extension of the image recognition, computer vision modeling I was talking about. So again, all of the counterfeiters leave like a signature, right? They have a style. They're using certain printers. They use certain fonts. It's different colors that deviate from our authentic products and artwork, right? I can layer in information from what customers are telling us, right? Oh, I got the product, it's a different color than I expected. They're all blue. I expected pink, right? So you start, they're telling us who the seller was, right? What market it came from. All of those things can be brought together right, and arranged into clusters. Those clusters effectively are profiles of the different schemes that are being used against us in different ways. Now, whenever I get a new incident, let's say, that comes in, I look at the characteristics, I may be able to just put them into one of the schemes. Maybe the people that are doing it are connected. We start building that connective tissue in certain ways, right? So all of this can help with our disruption of the illicit trade networks in a very robust way. Okay, righty here. So talked a lot about the approach that we're taking, what this framework looks like, how it can be used, how are we driving it into the business, and where is it from an implementation standpoint, just as important. So we have this unified platform that it already exists. The agents are out there kind of doing their thing, piecing all the data together, and Truth in Advertising, where we are right now, is really working on the orchestration of all the tasks, right? To make sure that everything is coordinated and that it is providing us with the insights and the information that the team needs when and where they need it and in what format, right? But importantly, keep the human in the loop through the whole process. Very important along the way. The other piece of this is entirely scalable, right? I know I get a new data set or I have a new algorithm that's providing signals for us, just plug it right in, right? It fits right within the framework. Not much here that I want to go through other than I mentioned at the outset the two big areas that our team is very focused on, the disrupt side and the protecting the value chain integrity. This stuff is already being very helpful in both regards. It's really a big part of it right now is continuing with the change management process, right? So that people can interact with these insights and solutions, provide the feedback, and it's just going to get better and better as we go. Measure, 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 right? How well are we doing, right? Well, we have KPIs. We know what we want to measure to figure out how well we're doing here. The things that are almost guaranteed by construction, better speed to insights. We know we've already shrunk the time it is to kind of collect this intelligence and bring it together. I sit in the SAS Viya model building module religiously, right? I am there constantly, and it has been a godsend to improve the performance of the underlying models that we've developed here, right? Things like the generative AI have improved how consumable the analytics are. You don't have to go to dashboards. You can ask your questions directly. But at the end of the day, we got to try and catch bad guys too. So this is going to be about generating new leads, high-value targets for investigative work that we're doing, and we're getting there. We're not quite there yet with this system, right? We've got all our brands and markets assessed and prioritized. We've done that. We actually have very specific definitions that we use for business value recovery that we're giving back to the business, right? So if we're going after targets, we go after them civilly, right? We can actually get hard dollars back for the business through civil litigation. Obviously, we can put them away in a criminal sense as well. We remove product off the market, like dangerous product. There's value in that right there. So all of that translates to a dollar value, things like that, that we're giving back to the business, right? But number one, obviously, is we're protecting our patients. Am I at time? Good, okay. So let's just go back to where we started, right? You know, back to Lazzaro, right? That investigation lasted 3 years, right? Had we had this system in place back then, I guarantee that it would have shrunk the cycle, right? That investigative life cycle, right? Lots of meetings, piecing intelligence together. We could have avoided an awful lot of that, right? So, key takeaways from all this. I think, the discussion at the outset, you kind of saw, I gave you the shock and awe, right, of what this stuff is all about. Huge health risks, huge economic impact, right, that we have to be concerned about. This kind of framework can be extremely useful. You can't stop all crime, right, but you can try to put a dent in it, take people out as best as you can, protect patients as best you can, right? But here's kind of the call to action, if you will, right? This is such an immature area, this area of brand protection, right? It doesn't get enough study from an academic standpoint. There are not enough industry solutions out there. And when I say industry solutions, there are a lot of places that will do one thing, okay? They scrape the web, right? There aren't many groups out there that are holistically looking at this across the board, right? This stuff transverses every area of the supply chain, right? It's regulatory, it's on the commercial side, it's very holistic, right? So having a system and a framework that can bring all of that stuff together is very, very important, right? So if anyone wants to partner in any way, wants to have discussions about the way forward, I am very happy to have those discussions, right? And so with that, I will take any questions if anybody has any. You good?
Can you hear me? Or can you? Oh, okay. I was going to ask, could you elaborate on once your agent identifies any potential counterfeit pharmaceuticals between there and then any alert systems? Like, how do you go from the agent identifying it to then kicking off an investigation?
The intelligence has to get to the right people, right, in the right place at the right time. We have partnerships with investigators all over the world, right? And so usually we'll put a package together and work with those investigators to carry the ball forward. Local law enforcement, as an example, right? We're not the ones actually going and kicking down doors and conducting raids. However, they'll take the intelligence that we supply, supplement it with intelligence that they have, right, and then carry the ball forward to start taking these guys out, right?
Great presentation. What do you find is the number one source of your intelligence that something is going on? Is that always going to be a customer complaint? Is it Customs and Border Patrol saying, hey, we got this shipment of Viagra or whatever it might be, or contact lenses, or how are you getting those actual notifications of the counterfeit products or the mislabeled products?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So as I mentioned, we're putting a lot of the signals into our model, right? We have a good sample of confirmed counterfeit, regardless of where it came from. A lot of it does come from the customers though, right? But it could have started with signals from other places, right? And when we have it in the model, you can clearly see the relative importance of those things. And yes, customer complaints, as they come in, they're not confirmed with anything. You got to go through and investigate to make sure. So that's number one. But the other one, right, interestingly, is diversion, right? I see those dynamics all the time. They show up in the models. They show up when you just visualize stuff. You can see the flashes of diversion occurring, and then down the road, invariably you'll see the counterfeit happen, right? There are other things too that are a little bit harder to put in the model in a systematic way, but things like the sales patterns, when you see a customer sales drop, that really needs to be something that you investigate with the commercial teams to understand what's going on there. Because what you don't want is down the road to see that counterfeit bleed into the supply chain when you look back and you say, well, 2 years ago we did a contract renewal and it didn't work out so well. And so those kinds of things are really important to look at.
Do you think, is this a data problem? How do you integrate data from different data sources? I know data lies across industries in different dimensions. So gathering data is a huge problem. And also in terms of the refresh rate, right? So you might identify there is a risk happening, but do you know what is the timeline? Is it kind of a real-time kind of scenario?
Yeah. So first on the data side, right? The data integration piece is massive, right? Everybody experiences this, right? They're disparate sources. How do you get them to talk to one another, right? So you have to figure out what level can I bring these data assets together, right? For example, product, the naming of a product appears very differently, right, in one system compared to another system. At what level can I put them together, right? I may have to take out the root of each field in those data sets to bubble up to like some brand level. So at the very least, I can summarize some of the signals that I'm seeing from one data asset to another, right? Others are much easier, right? I have very direct comparison, like I mentioned, the product license plate, the serial number, etc. With respect to the refresh rate, this is an area we're kind of immature right now, right? We're doing it on different levels in terms of refresh rate. There are certain sources that are very automated, weekly refresh of things where the data is going to come in. There are other things that still require a little bit of manual stuff as well, right? So we're really trying to work on how do we harmonize the time element of this so it's all working together, right? Not quite there yet.